Today, I'm gonna build the most powerful PC I've ever built. This thing's gonna be a beast. Oh my god, I'm so excited, you guys. Hi there, Tech Dweeb here. Thanks for clicking on the video. So yeah, I'm super excited about this. I'm gonna be building my new PC from the ground up. I'll explain each component as I add them, but as you might be able to tell from the video, I've got lots of MSI parts. The reason for that is because I bought the graphics card, CPU, a power supply, and motherboard as part of a bundle from Newegg. That's the only reliable way to get a new GPU and not pay the scalper tax. And while lots of the GPU bundles you'll find are pretty garbage value, like seriously garbage, this one was actually really good. I was surprised to find it, to be honest. So since I had an MSI graphics card, power supply, and motherboard, I figure why not get some other MSI parts for that sweet brand synergy. Not the case though. I didn't like any of the MSI cases. I wanted a white case, and the MSI cases are kinda So even though these aren't the exact parts I would have chosen if I could buy my own GPU and motherboard from scratch, I'm still super happy that I'm getting some great stuff at a great value, and I'm hopeful that this PC will look and perform awesome. Before we start putting this together, it's time for a word from our sponsor, StuffSpace. Today's video is brought to you by StuffSpace. Do you have stuff that's taking up too much space? Sadly, every day 9 billion Americans worldwide have too little space, too much stuff. And that's where StuffSpace comes in. StuffSpace is an all-in-one solution for storing and sharing your things and stuff. Using innovative reactive template-based layout configurations, you can easily and efficiently organize 69% more stuff than the leading stuff sharing service at only 69% of the price. StuffSpace has 23-hour live fax support to help you quickly with all the things about your stuff. And with affordable pricing plans and financing options, you can have a space to stuff your stuff for less than the price of 12 coffees a day. Don't be the only jerk on your company weekend softball team without a StuffSpace to share your stuff. Sign up is easy. Simply go to stuffspace.net/sign up for stuffspace/registration_promotion/account #4B_umlaut and use promo code TheWeebStuff to get 4 free days of StuffSpace. Yes, obligation required. Thank you to StuffSpace for sponsoring the video and stuff. And now back to the build. As with any PC build, we're going to be starting with the motherboard. This is the MSI MPG A750 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi Gaming Motherboard AMD AM4 SATA 6 gigabits per second M.2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 HDMI ATX. So it's a full ATX form factor, which is not what I would have chosen if I could choose all my own parts. I love ITX PCs, you know, the little guys. I built a few ITX machines in the past and they're just so cute. But it is useful to have a full-sized ATX motherboard because of the extra expansion slots and the port headers and stuff. This MSI MPG X570 has a BIOS flashback option, which is important if you're going to be using a 5000 series processor, because the default BIOS that was shipped with this wasn't meant for 5000 series processors, and you'll need to flash an updated BIOS. And this board lets you flash an updated BIOS without needing to install an older processor just to get it to post. This motherboard also has another feature I love to see, with active cooling for the chipset. The X570 chipset, with its PCIe Gen 4 capabilities, can generate substantial heat, and the active cooling becomes even more important when you're pushing your processor and RAM beyond their, default clock speeds. The first step is the processor. It's a pretty important step. Computers don't work very good without a processor, or at all. This is the Ryzen 7 5800X. I probably would have gone with a 5900X if I was choosing, but the Newegg bundle gods have spoken. This will perform great for the stuff I plan to use it for. Gaming, obviously, is not going to bottleneck anything considering I'm only running at 120 Hz, and I do obviously need to do some video editing. Yeah, you're welcome, by the way, and some other graphically intensive applications for the other work I do, so, this processor will feel like a nice little upgrade from my slightly less powerful 10700K in terms of productivity. Here we have our RAM. This is the G.SKILL Trident Z Neo RAM, rated for 3600 MHz. cards. These are 16 gigabyte sticks, so we're running 32 gigabytes total. I was thinking maybe I would upgrade to 64 gigabytes, which is useful for the work I like to do. Not so much for gaming, obviously. But, you know, with the impending DDR5 switchover, I might hold off. Oh, and this RAM has RGB goodness, so we should get some nice extra FPS in our games from the RGB effects. Let's do the SSD now. This is another plus for this board. It has a built-in SSD heatsink, and it's physically connected to the chipset cooler, so it should perform a bit better than an isolated heatsink. We're going with the XPG Gamix S70 blade, which does come with its own little heatsink, but we don't need that obviously. We're going bareback. This is just 1 terabyte, but I'm really excited about this component because it's PCIe Gen 4 running at 6 gigabytes per second, so I don't expect it to be earth-shattering compared to my old Gen 3 SSD. I think the performance you get in benchmarks isn't really representative of real-world performance, but it should feel a bit more snappy, especially with video editing. The real upgrade will come when direct storage hits the scene, which is where games will be able to stream assets directly off the SSD in real time. So the games will need to preload and cache the game assets like textures and models, similar to the tech that's used on the newest consoles. We gotta wait a bit for that though. I'll be ready when it hits, unless I upgrade before then. Let's prepare our case now. This is the famous NZXT H510. I freaking love the look of this case. As you probably know, I love white computers. I've built in the H210 in the past, which is the ITX version. That's actually one of my other little test rigs that I use for lower end hardware, and it also doubles as the PC my cousin uses when he comes to visit. So now I'm gonna have the big brother of that PC. While I do love the look of this case, I don't love the airflow. That's why I'm going with liquid cooling, because an airflow focused build will definitely be held back by this case. I really love the look of it though, so I'm gonna try and make it work. It's so simple and minimalist with clean, crisp edges and a few classy accents, and I'm a big fan of how they handle the cable management options around the back. Building in the H510 feels just like building in the H210, just a bit bigger obviously. Let's prepare the power supply here. This is the MSI MPG A750GF. 750 watts, 80 plus gold certified, and this one's fully modular, which is always nice. We'll plug in all the cables we need. 24-pin motherboard, 8-pin and an extra 4-pin for the CPU are needed on this motherboard, 2 PCIe 8-pin connectors for the graphics card, and a SATA power cable for my storage drive. And now we'll slap in the power supply. I'm putting the fan pointing down since there is airflow at the bottom of the case, and I don't want the hot air from the power supply coming up into the case from the bottom. I'll have separate intakes for the airflow elsewhere. Cooler time, baby! First we'll take out the radiator mount from the front of the case to get ready. For our cooler we're going with the MSI Mag Core Liquid 280R AIO Liquid CPU cooler, which is a 280mm radiator. I was debating between a 240 and a 280. There were more 240 designs that were a lot cheaper, and I liked them better, but I decided since we have a Ryzen 7 5800X, which can run pretty darn warm, the 280 provides a substantial difference in cooling potential compared to the 240. But before I mount this, I'm gonna make sure that the graphics card will fit once the radiator's in, and it does with a good inch or so of space extra. Then we'll need to mount the cooler's radiator to the radiator mount, and then we'll add on our big 140mm RGB fans. I really don't want that hot air from the radiator coming back through the case, so I'm gonna have these fans blowing out through the radiator. I do anticipate airflow issues with so much heat being sucked out through the very minimal ventilation at the front of this case. These are the sacrifices you make when you don't go with an airflow focused case. It should be okay, to be honest. I'm hoping that my rear and top intake will provide enough decent cool airflow flowing through the case, and of course I could always adjust my workflow and performance to lower the temperatures. And I think in solid sided cases like this, you have to accept that your components will be running a bit warmer than they would be if you you had more airflow. I did a whole video on how important airflow is. Check that out in the link in the description below. But basically, you're not really going to have problems until you reach very high temps and you start thermal throttling. And at that point, you need more airflow. No question. But I highly doubt that this big beefy cooler will ever let my CPU get to that point. And I've extensively researched this GPU, and it's one of the coolest running in its class. I should be fine. Everything will be just fine. This is my second favorite moment in a PC build, putting the motherboard in the case. Oh, let's remove these fans that come with the case. We have our own sweet RGB fans, and I'll save these fans for another build in the future. You can always use extra fans. I love putting the motherboard in because after all the tedious stuff with the coolers and the cables and getting everything ready, this is the first moment when you get a feel for how your new PC will look. It's just so satisfying. And look at that. Just beautiful in my opinion. To mount the water blockhead to the CPU, we're going to apply some Noctua NTH1 thermal compound paste to the CPU. Just put a small amount. You have to be very precise with this. You need to put a glob exactly 1/24th the size of an Oreo. Not the thin ones or the double stuffed ones. Get it right, or your computer will explode. I'm tightening the mounts, going back and forth between the two mounting brackets for a nice even squeeze. And then I'm gonna take the RGB cable and route it around the top, because we're gonna have to deal with that in a few minutes as well. Let's wrap this up. We're gonna get our intake and exhaust RGB fans. This is the InWin Serious Loop Addressable RGB Triple Fan Kit. 120mm. I like the look of the RGB on these fans. It's very minimal, just a very thin little line around the outside. I have experience with the same fans from the InWin A1 Plus case, which is the PC that I have on my TV in my Dungeon of Solitude in my mom's basement. Oh, and we might as well add my secondary storage drive. This is an 8GB Seagate Barracuda hard drive, and this goes in the hard drive bay at the bottom of the case. Now we'll attach to our white cable extensions. You can find these cable extension kits on Amazon. They add a nice touch to a build, being able to have white cables for your power connectors without needing to shell out the white plastic tax that I talked about in that video I made where I painted a graphics card white. Check that out in the link below. They're easy, you just plug them into the power supply cables. The only downside is you have extra cables to manage. Speaking of which, let's do a quick cable management montage. Right now! Gotta manage your cables? Yes indeed. It's so important, even my mom agreed. Manage those cables, it doesn't take long. And while you do it, you can play this song. Now on to my favorite moment. You guessed it, putting in the GPU. This is the MSI Ventus GeForce RTX 3080 PCIe Gen 4, factory overclocked, with 10GB of GDDR6X VRAM, and this is a triple fan design with an integrated metal backplate. I love the look of this GPU, way better than the EVGA 3070 that Linus gave me. I made a video about that too, it's linked in the description below. This GPU is just gorgeous. Oh, and I'm trying this out for the first time. This is an easy DIY fab GPU support bracket, in white of course. I think this will look really great and provide some nice support over the years while this thing hangs from that PCIe slot. And there we go, all done. What do you think? Pretty nice looking if I do say so myself. I'll probably play around with some of the positioning and the cables and stuff, but for now I'm just dying to get this all packed up and give it a test. Alright, here we go. This is always a bit nerve-wracking. The moment of truth. We're powering on. Oh, there's signs of life in there. And there the RGB is glowing. That's a good start. Some rainbow unicorn puke colors coming out there. We gotta be patient here. Come on, baby. Post, damn you. Yeah, alright, we have a pose. Let's get into the BIOS and make sure everything's all detected correctly. Ah, look at that. Sorry, I don't have the focus on the screen well. We can see our CPU is there running at the proper clock speed. Our memory is detected. It's running at the lower speed. We gotta enable XMP and do a reboot before that's detected properly. Yeah, and the storage is all showing up there properly. So I did clone my old system drive to this SSD, so this does have Windows installed and ready to go. I think we just need to save our BIOS settings here and give it a reboot. Let's see if we boot it to Windows, okay? And motherboard initialization, and there's our spinning disk. Alright, we did it, guys. We're gonna get the Windows. We're gonna see here in a second. It's gonna say that it's gotta get some devices ready because, you know, it doesn't have the drivers installed for this motherboard and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm really, really happy about this. We'll be in Windows in a little bit here, and the hard work is done. We're good to go. So all I need to do now is install the RGB software to get all the fan detected and everything, and obviously get all the drivers and everything all configured. And so just give me a little bit to do all that, and then we'll do a gaming test to see the performance, and I'll give you a final tour of the completed build. I'm so happy right now. Here we are up and running. Everything's working great. You can see here our memory's running at its rated speed of 3600 MHz. Over here you can see our CPU with all 8 cores and 16 threads. The temperatures over here on the hardware monitors are good. You can see our CPU temperatures idling at around 50 degrees, which is fine. GPU's idling at around 40 degrees. Everything else looks good too. Even under load, the CPU and GPU can climb up to like 75 or 80 degrees after, you know, extended gaming sessions. They don't climb above that, which is very promising considering the closed style of case that we have. And the performance overall is just amazing. I'm really enjoying working and gaming on this machine. Let's do a quick little gaming test to show how it performs. We'll start with my favorite benchmark game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, running at 1440p with ultra settings, balanced DLSS enabled, which on 1440p is basically unnoticeable. But we're gonna do our first test run with ray tracing turned off. As you'll see, we're getting about 160 FPS. Which is just great. I told you guys before that I run an ultra-wide monitor at 3440 by 1440, which is actually higher than 1440p. It's about halfway between 1440p and 4K, and I can finally play games at this resolution without needing to bump down the settings or use resolution scaling. So let's try the same run with ray tracing on, at maximum. Ray tracing gives a pretty big hit to the FPS, but we're still gonna get a 117 FPS average by the end of this run. I personally don't think the visuals justify that performance hit, to be honest. I'm gonna be doing a video very soon on ray tracing where I compare the visuals and the performance in various games, so, you know, stay tuned for that. Tomb Raider's not the most demanding ray tracing game though, so let's bump it up a notch and give one more game a try. Cyberpunk, running at 1440p, and we're gonna use the highest preset, Ultra Ray Tracing, but we'll put on balanced DLSS, and we're gonna get 67 average FPS, which is great considering a Cyberpunk 1440p with max settings including ray tracing is probably the most demanding RTX game that exists, and it's pretty poorly optimized. And if we're getting a really solid playable FPS with RTX on, then I think you'll agree that this 3080 and 5800X are a really solid combo. I can't believe how nice this looks. This is definitely my favorite build that I've ever made. It's fun to build and it looks great. It's crisp, it's clean, a good mix of black and white components and accents, and it's just so dang elegant, in my opinion. The best part about PC building is that there's so many different ways to do it. There's so many cases and components with different looks and functions, so many different visual styles you could go for. Each of us has our own preferences, and it's so awesome that this hobby lets us experiment and build exactly the type of machine that appeals to each of our sensibilities, whatever they may be. And that brings us to the end. Please let me know in the comments below. How do you think this one turned out? What would you have done differently? Did this help you out? Do you have any questions? I'd love to hear from you down there. And while you're down there, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, or a thumbs down if you didn't like it for some reason. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.